All right, we are live. Okay, so welcome into just live broadcast. You can use this on some podcasts as well, but we're going to be talking about some, the Eastern Conference breakdown. So I'm your host. I'm Ace from the Two Pad Stack. It's not just the Two Pad Stack today. We have a wonderful guest, another show from the Fans for Sports Network, Dan from Islanders Anxiety. How's it going today, Dan?
I'm great, Ace. How are you?
Very good, very good. Another day in paradise here. Although it definitely seemed out there today in New England like the gates of hell were opening up. We had like hailstorms here and everything. It was pretty wild.
Yeah, I work in New York City, and we had two rainstorms that I think maybe combined lasted about 20 minutes, and it was very odd. One, the sun was completely out, and it was a very odd experience. At first, I thought they were washing my office building, but then it turned out, no, that's rain. What is going on right now? This is very strange. But yeah, it's I'm about done with this weather. I'm looking forward to the fall for many reasons, mainly for weather I can kind of understand.
Yeah, I feel that. I don't know how it is down there, but like the last week or so, when I wake up in the morning, the windows are open, the cold air's coming in, and it's starting to feel a lot like fall's right around the corner. Like we had a few mornings where it was like in the 50 degrees out there.
Yeah, we've had that too.
Gorgeous.
And then by 10 o'clock, it's like 80 degrees again, and you're like,
and humid too.
Yeah.
Oh,
it's like, bring back that morning air. But yeah, like I said, hopefully we get to some stuff that we can understand, and with all the fall stuff that we like to talk about too, baseball, hockey, and football, and all that good stuff.
Yeah, football's here, man. I mean, we just had some NFL preseason stuff. We've got a lot of really good shows here on FFFSN that covers football content. So if you're interested in that, we try to have as much coverage per team as there is available. So take a look at our website. We've got great articles available as well to cover football. But all I know is that Drake May needs to be given the starter job for the New England Patriots. Jacoby Brissett just isn't it for me. But also I understand we don't want to rush the guy. But anyways, we're a hockey podcast here. So is the Islanders Anxiety. But hockey season's right around the corner. Training camps are right around the corner. They're going to open up in like less than a month now. Yeah. So we're going to have preseason hockey, which say what you want about that, but that's not too far away. So what we're going to do here today is we're going to not keep this a really long broadcast. It's not a long live stream, but what we're going to do is for our first live streams, we're going to just break down what we believe the Eastern Conference may look like. And it's going to be, we're going to rely on the experts of the division here. So I'm not a Metropolitan Division expert. I can give you my observations, but I'm going to lean on my friend here, Dan, who covers the Islanders as well as, just the Metropolitan Division. He's going to give us a breakdown of who he thinks are going to be the top teams in the Metro. I'm going to tackle the Atlantic, and Dan's going to sprinkle in his thoughts on some of those teams as well. We'll have a lot to say about the Leafs, I think. But yeah, really looking forward to this. This will be fun. So, Dan, why don't you go ahead? I'll hand it over to you, and I'm interested in hearing who you think will be at the bottom of the Metropolitan Division.
Yeah, we can start at the bottom. First of all, I should start with a couple of caveats. One, as an Islanders fan, I hate all of these other teams. So that might color the way I have them all set up. Number one. Number two is this is actually, I'm glad you asked me to come on, because this is the first time this offseason I've really had a chance to kind of take stock of everything that's gone on. Because I just, you just sort of let it happen, and it just, oh, that guy signed there, or oh, that guy left there. So being able to look at everything here has really kind of made me, contextualize this stuff in a certain way for the first time, really all summer long. So I appreciate, again, you inviting me on here. So at the bottom, though, of the Metro, I think we can safely say that it would probably be the Columbus Blue Jackets. Sorry, Blue Jackets fans. You know what? It's hockey. Crazy stuff happens. I've seen my own team get counted out, by experts, and then all of a sudden have a great season. So I'm not saying that this is locked in stone or anything, but the Blue Jackets had a bit of a rough offseason. They lost some guys. They didn't have a coach until a couple of weeks ago, and they got a good one in Dean Evison. I think, I was kind of hoping the Islanders might get him when he was let go in Minnesota. So I think he's a good coach, but they did lose Patrick Laine. How much he was going to contribute to them in the first place, I don't know. But whenever you remove a Laine from the situation, it's probably not good. They did get Sean Monahan. Maybe they can find some magic with Johnny Gaudreau again. But this is not looking like a really talent-laden team here. So
that's a good point. I didn't even think of the Monahan-Gaudreau combination with their time in Calgary. I didn't even think of that. About the Blue Jackets, Can you tell me that Dean Evison does not play Creed from The Office? I'm like 99% sure that's the same guy.
I mean, I haven't seen them in the same room together, so
that's
I mean,
true.
it's
Yeah,
possible.
Good
Yeah.
point.
So, but yeah, you know, this is going to be a recurring theme throughout these power rankings, in that Elvis Merzlikins is the goalie still, even though he's been rumored to be traded probably for what, two and a half seasons now. So he's still here. And so, you know, there's a lot of guys in the division that they're still here. So again, I don't know. It's hard to pick any other team to finish last in the division, but again, you never know.
Yeah, what a absolute shit show that was with Mike Babcock.
Yeah.
Like Babcock's going to be our guy, and he comes in, and then you have like the let me look at your cell phone thing like come out in the news. And
so some teams, and this goes for teams in all sports, like they try to they outthink themselves, and like, you know, it's like DJ Khaled, you played yourself, you know, and it's like, you know, you could have just picked a normal coach who, you know, doesn't have to be a guy who's had an NHL experience before, but you didn't have to do this. Like, well, what if we take Mike Babcock and it turns out to be great? Well, guess what? It didn't. So
right. So yeah, I sometimes think it's kind of like the smartest guy in the room syndrome. You think that you're better than everyone else, and you know better than everyone else. And the Blue Jackets definitely had a dose of that when they brought Babcock in.
Right. So that's number 8 in the division. Number 7, I have the Philadelphia Flyers, who for for half a season last year, they looked like they were about to make a big leap, and then they kind of wheels came off and benefited my team, but not so much the Flyers. Here's the good news for the Flyers. I have many Flyers fans. I love them to death. This is, you know, a team that whether they're good, they're bad, Flyers fans, they're always full of excitement and enthusiasm and energy, and I do appreciate that and respect that. The Flyers kind of already won because they got their guy Matvei Michkov over here. He's in Philly. He's going to be on the NHL team. He's out from behind the Iron Curtain, and that's it. They won. Like, whatever happens now happens. If he has a good season as a rookie, great. If it's not so great, it's okay. Like, he's got a long road ahead of him. I'm just looking at this roster. It's not really all that much changed from last year. You know, Mark Stahl played for them last year, which I thought was kind of surprising. And, you know, Cam Atkinson is left now, which again, I didn't realize he was still there. You know, Carter Hart obviously is not going to be available to them this year. So this roster also is going to have a lot of problems, but if Michkov turns out to be pretty good, hey, maybe they'll be pretty good and they'll hang around the playoff line for a little while. And then, like you said, you never know. So, but yeah, I'm looking at this. They finished 6th last year, and I have them finishing 7th, which I don't know, kind of makes sense to me.
Yeah, I think I'm a little bit more bullish on the Flyers than what you are. I do think that Tortorella has an ability to like drag these guys that probably wouldn't work as hard, maybe to pull the rope a little bit harder. And I do actually have Michkov as my Calder winner for this year. And I do think he'll get all the reps, like compared to maybe what some of these other kids not named who's the kid that just went overall over to San Jose?
Celebrini.
Macklin
for sure.
Celebrini.
Definitely. Yeah.
So I do think Michkov will be given an opportunity to play top line, and I think Tortorella will probably be able to get those guys there. They have the big Russian goalie that's like 6'7". I don't know. Fedotov. I don't think they're going to make the playoffs, but I have the Flyers at 6 for the Metro.
This whole sort of middle segment. First of all, there's not a ton separating a lot of these Metro teams, even the Blue Jackets, we just kind of shit on for a little while. There's not a whole lot separating them from everybody else, basically. And it would not surprise me in the slightest if the Flyers ended up 4th and made the playoffs, you know, but it would take, again, a John Tortorella led team and kind of just beat it out of them and made it work. But you never know. Some guy has a career year and things could break right for them. Number 6, I have one of my most hated teams, the Pittsburgh Penguins, who
interesting.
Let me put it this way. When your off-season acquisitions include 2 guys that played for the Islanders, you're in a bad position. This is not where anybody wants to be after the offseason is all said and done. I love Anthony Beauvillier. He scored the last goal at Nassau Coliseum. He will forever be an Islanders legend. Sebastian Aho, the other Sebastian Aho, is a pretty darn good player. He's not a great player by any means, but he's pretty good. You can't have those 2 guys highlight your offseason and expect to like walk out a winner. They got Kevin Hayes. he's like 1,000 years old now. They basically, the funniest thing about getting Kevin Hayes is they just replaced Jeff Carter with another Jeff Carter. Like, he's the same guy. So I don't know why they did that. They did just get Rutger McGroarty from Winnipeg, which is kind of a big deal. If you want to know how Penguins writers view this acquisition, a friend of mine, my friend Michael Leboff, who I do the podcast with, texted me. I don't know which writer it was, but they were writing that, Sidney Crosby's only got a few years left. The Penguins are going to need a new captain. And, McGroarty did captain Team USA in the World Juniors and yada, yada, yada. He's got all this leadership. And so they've already basically made this guy the captain of the Penguins once Sidney Crosby retires.
Interesting. So, which is, I find that fascinating because this is the kid that got drafted, was very excited to be a Winnipeg Jet, and then suddenly, I'm not going to report. Yeah. I don't want to go there. Doesn't really seem like a leader to me, personally.
It's a little bit weird, and we'll never maybe know exactly the whole thing that happened. But the thing about the Penguins to me is that Wonder Boy Kyle Dubas, one of his first jobs as Penguins GM was to secure their goaltending. And what he did was he signed Tristan Jarry to a 5-year contract that immediately seemed like one of the most regrettable contracts in the entire NHL. And this guy is always just good enough to not get you anything. And to me, Tristan Jarry will always be the guy who in double overtime gave the puck to Josh Bailey, who then scored an overtime game-winning goal in the playoffs, which should have got him a one-way ticket to the KHL. But this is Penguins world where, every goalie is Tom Barrasso just waiting to happen. And, to me, Jarry just ain't it. Alex Nedeljkovic, he ain't it. So I do think the Penguins are better than the Flyers, but this team is on a one-way ticket to Nowheresville, and I cannot wait until they're finally there and they are out of our lives completely, at least for a little while longer. But so there you go. But they finished 5th, and again, I had them 6th. 5th in the Metro.
So speaking of awful deals that are regrettable, did you celebrate your Rick DiPietro Day this year?
Oh, was that when is that? I thought
that's July 1. July 1.
Yeah.
Until 2028.
I always
Islanders have to pay DiPietro.
Oh yeah,
they're 1.5 million.
In New York, I think did Bobby Bonilla finally? I think they finally paid that off, the Mets, didn't they? Or maybe he might have another couple of years. But it's always like Bobby Bonilla, Rick DiPietro, the guys who are always getting paid. Exactly. So Rick is a legend, and I personally will always appreciate that he wanted to stay an Islander very badly. And so he signed that contract, which was immediately like, this is probably not going to end well. I remember I worked for the AP at the time. And I remember telling a friend of mine who was a huge Devils fan, I was like, well, if he's healthy and he stays pretty good, because he was pretty good that year. And then the year after, making $4.5 million for a starting goalie, that's not bad. Well, guess what? He couldn't even complete that first objective and to stay healthy. And it's a long road with Rick, but we don't need to get there. But I'm glad he's making his money, and he's on ESPN radio here, so he's doing pretty well.
Love it.
Yeah. Okay. So number 5, I have the Washington Capitals.
Okay.
Who, I might be a little bit lower on them than a lot of other people. They, few teams have made more changes this offseason than the Caps. In comes Pierre-Luc Dubois, Jacob Chikrin, Matt Roy, Logan Thompson, Andrew Mangiapane, Brandon Duhaime in the depth department. They lost Darcy Kemper, okay, and that's about it, really. Nick Jensen, I guess, who had to go to Ottawa in the Chikrin trade. This team could be pretty good, or they could be more or less the same. Like, just because they're new guys doesn't mean that they're all going to be terrific. I do think that it's possible that they make the playoffs. I don't see it. They're still waiting on Charlie Lindgren to have another. I mean, this guy was a career minor leaguer until last year, and now they're expecting him to do it again. Maybe he does. I don't know. Their defense doesn't really do much for me. Their depth doesn't really do much for me. And who knows what Alex Ovechkin does. Maybe he scores another 30 goals. Maybe he kind of takes half the season off like he sort of did last year. Yeah. And Dubois is a fascinating wild card, right? If he shows up, he's pretty good. But he only, shows up, what was the line from Anchorman? 60% of the time he works 20% of the time, or whatever it is. So it's a little bit
of the time it works every time.
Yeah, exactly. So they got Milano and Mangiapane, and so they got good players. I'm not saying that they're terrible, but whenever a team makes wholesale changes like that, I'm always like, is this really a good idea? I don't know. Seems like
you gotta think of the chemistry too, right? Like
yes, right.
you can't just throw all these pieces together and expect them to have that synergy, right? So
Sure. Yeah.
I actually, believe it or not, you are higher on the Washington Capitals than I am. So I think that the Caps are ripe for a bottom of the conference performance.
It's possible. Sure.
I mean, with the age of Ovechkin,
yeah.
like there's no more Kuznetsov. Obviously, he went over whenever. No more Backstrom.
Yeah. Tom Wilson's not what he was.
Tom Wilson's not what he was. TJ Oshie's like 39. He probably won't even be playing.
No,
like the top six is just not great.
Yeah.
You just basically have Ovi out there, and you also have to think of like Ovechkin's legacy now too. Like how many opportunities are the Capitals going to have to try to get him to a position where he can catch up to Gretzky? So are they going to make like the right decision for the organization, or are they going to make the right decision for Ovechkin? And I don't know what they will choose there, because Ovechkin is a representation of their organization at this point. So
it's a tough spot to be in. Like, I don't envy them. You know, they got their cup, which is great, and then it's like now what? But I mean, just I went by NHL.com and I grabbed everybody's kind of ins and outs and what their projected lineup is. We never know, but I mean, when your top two centers are like Dylan Strome and Pierre-Luc Dubois. Again, it's tough.
Yeah, I mean, I heard rumors that the LA Kings were willing to pay to offload that Pierre-Luc Dubois contract. So
fascinating. I don't know. I don't want him on my team, but he is fascinating. I will give him that. Okay, so that was number 5, and number 4, my own New York Islanders. Again, probably going to be kind of on the cusp of the playoffs. If the Caps beat them out, if the Penguins beat them out, I wouldn't be surprised. I do think the Islanders have a little bit more than they do. Chemistry is obviously a big thing. The team is very, very consistent. They have had new players. I know people always like, oh, they're the same. They're not the same, but they have had a lot of consistency. A lot of players are still around. Bo Horvat and Matt Barzal have found chemistry. Brock Nelson remains one of the most underrated guys in the entire NHL. Nobody really talks about him.
I love Brock Nelson.
He scores 30 goals a year, and nobody ever talks about this guy. Their defense is a bit of a question mark. Adam Pelech and Ryan Pulock aren't what they were a couple of years ago when they were making their runs to the semifinals. I'm glad they re-signed former Bruin Mike Riley, who's fit in really nicely. Scott Mayfield basically got hurt in the first game of the season, and he played like half a season on a busted ankle or whatever it was. Finally sat out, so he wasn't really optimal. Noah Dobson and Alex Romanov took a while, but they play really well together. And they've got goaltending that we expect to bounce back. Ilya Sorokin didn't have a great season last year. I think that's fairly safe to say. Semyon Varlamov is still pretty good. So I think if all things considered, plus the additions of Anthony Duclair and again another ultimate wild card, Maxim Siplikov, who's coming over from the KHL, they should have enough to, I think, make the playoffs. So they're gonna beat the world and finish first overall? No, I don't think so. But I think they do have enough to make the playoffs. But famous last words.
Well, I'm interested in getting your take on Mike Riley, because Mike Riley was serviceable in his first year with the Boston Bruins, and he parlayed that into a 3-year deal. It was like okay at the time, and then I don't know. I think he was battling some injuries or something, and he was treating the puck like it was a hand grenade, and he wanted nothing to do with it. I'm like, you are like the transition guy. You are supposed to be out there to move the puck, and you're just banging it off the glass every opportunity you get. And he, unfortunately, due to the injuries he had and due to that play that he had, he found himself sent down to Providence with the AHL Bruins and waived multiple times, no claims. So what have you thought of Riley's game?
So this is a true, honest to God, true story. When the Islanders and Bruins played in the playoffs in, 2021, I guess it was, my friend and I were watching Mike Riley, and we're like, you know what? He was going to be a free agent that year, like you said. And we were like, who would be perfect for the Islanders? Mike Riley. This guy is exactly what they need, a guy who can just play on the power play, move the puck, transition the puck, which the Islanders have had a lot of problems with lately. That would be fantastic. Of course, he re-signs to the Bruins, and we're like, geez, what are you going to do? Then he gets, waived and whatnot. Like, maybe they can get him. Nope, he ends up in Florida. Finally, he gets put on waivers by the Panthers. The Islanders pick him up, and finally we were like, yes, the prophecies have come true. The Islanders have finally acquired Mike Riley. And sure enough, he's been exactly what is advertised. He must have been hurt or something, or just maybe not fitting in right. But he moves the puck really well. He's not afraid to just shoot on the power play. The Islanders' power play has not been good, but it's much better when he's on it. And, sometimes just having that smart guy who knows how to get the puck from, their own zone into the neutral zone, or better still, the other team's zone is good enough. And the Islanders just don't have that. They have guys who are, Dobson is kind of like that, and they have guys who are good at like crunching bodies and playing defense. But transitioning the puck has been a problem for them. Their forwards aren't that good at it either, to be honest with you. But Riley seemed to have the knack for it, and so they re-signed him this year, another 1-year deal, and so he's fit in perfectly. And he joins the team, and it seems like he's been here the whole time. So maybe maybe it was injuries, maybe it was just not for him fitting in, not being comfortable. But we're glad he's here because he's really helped. So.
Is he PP1 or PP2 for you guys?
2, because Dobson is on. Okay. But at first Dobson wasn't really that good. He came around last year and it was okay. But that's the other thing too with the Islanders too is the reason I think they're going to be better is the 2 things that killed them last year were they could not kill a penalty to save their lives, and they could not protect a lead to save their lives. And so they managed to get 94 points and make the playoffs. And, they didn't really have a great series against the Carolina Hurricanes. They lost in 5 games. But if they can fix those 2 things, particularly the penalty kill, which has been terrific for years, just last year just died. They can, I think, be even better. And those are 2 fixable problems, I think, that they can solve. So hopefully, because if they don't, it's going to be a long season. And I for one, am sick of giving up power play goals at least once a game. It's the most depressing, awful thing.
Do the Islanders have an internal GM candidate to take over after Lou?
No, they don't. Lou will be here until he has decided he's not going to be here. People keep saying
or until the man upstairs decides
exactly.
He's not going to be here.
They keep talking. His son Chris is on the staff. His son was on staff when he was with the Devils too, and he mainly handles Bridgeport, the AHL team.
Yep.
And people keep talking about he's they're grooming Chris for this role. I have never in my entire this entire series as an Islanders fan ever heard Chris Lamoriello speak in front of a camera at any point. And it's like when somebody's being groomed for a job, you kind of know, right? You kind of get the idea that, they're putting this guy out there. He's making more decisions. He's becoming more of a face. That is not Chris Lamoriello. He just doesn't work that way. When they hired Patrick Waugh, they were like, Waugh, he's a GM in the Q and he'll be here. Waugh shows up and he's like, no, I don't want to be the GM. I want to be the coach. I want to focus on. So, okay, well, unless he's lying, I think he wants to be the coach. So, no, they do not have an internal candidate for GM.
Interesting.
Well, this is Lou's team until further otherwise notice. Further notice. So there you go. Okay, so that's them. And again, I'm perfectly willing to hear arguments that the Islanders are not the 4th best team in this division. I totally get it. Number 3, I have the Carolina Hurricanes, who lost a lot this offseason. They lost Jake Gensel. They lost Brady Shea. They lost Brett Pesce. They lost Teuvo Teravainen. They lost Stefan Nason. They lost Antti Ranta, but that's probably not that bad. And they lost Evgeny Kuznetsov, who, like you said, is now in Russia. They replaced him with guys like Sean Walker, Shane Gostisbehere, and those guys are okay. I don't know. Yeah, they're not as good as the guys who left. They brought in Jack Roslovic, who the Rangers couldn't kick off of Manhattan faster than they already did. They got a new GM who's former Flyers blogger Eric Tulsky, so that's pretty cool. But I think this team will be really good. I mean, I trust. I'm a big systems guy. I'll mention this when we get to the Bruins too. I love a coach that plays a system and you can plug in new guys and it's still pretty good. And the Bruins are kind of like that, and the Hurricanes are kind of like that too. So I think they'll still be good, but I don't think they're going to be, almost like President's Trophy good like they were last year. So, but we'll see. Again, another team I'm waiting on their demise. Also, Freddie Anderson is still here. Again, this guy is still here. Why is he still here? I don't know. What's he ever done? Nothing, but he's still their goalie. So there you go. Number 2, I have the New Jersey Devils, who, much like the Capitals, had a lot of help. Got a lot of help this offseason. Jacob Markstrom, Brett Pesce, Brendan Dillon, Stefan Nason, Thomas Tatar is back. How about that? A bunch of other guys. They got Sheldon Keefe now as their coach, and it'll be interesting to see how he coaches somebody who's not the most scrutinized team in the entire universe. And they didn't lose a whole lot. John Marino is in Utah now, but for the most part, I think these are all upgrades. And here's the thing about the Devils, though. And I watch them a lot because I have, we have MSG Plus over here. We get the Devils, Rangers, Islanders. This team is better. I think they'll be very good. They're still, I feel like, 1 or 2 injuries away from being a complete disaster. That might be anybody. If you took anybody's number 1 center off the roster for an injury, I think they might have problems. But the Devils feel like they just don't have quite the depth to survive. They lost Nico Hischier and Jack Hughes last year. And Dougie Hamilton. That was just, it wasn't going to work. You know, if I lose one of those guys this year, maybe they'll be okay. But again, if they lose two of them or two other guys, maybe they're in trouble. So I don't know.
I'm not super high on them with their goalie choice, though. Like, Jacob Markstrom, like, I understand. Like, I feel like he's a regular season Vezina caliber goalie. And then when the pressure gets applied, he kind of folds like a cheap tent you buy at Walmart or something.
I think that's fair. You know what happens a lot of times is guys end up on the trade block so long and for so many cycles that they start to take on this sort of like they people seem to think that they're better than they are. And it's like, you know, okay, you know, the Flames were going to trade Markstrom for like a year and a half. He was going to get traded to the Devils, like not this past trade deadline,
right?
The deadline before, you know, or he was going to get traded to the Leafs, or he was going to.
The prophecy was foretold.
Yes, exactly. And after a certain point, it becomes like, yeah, okay, that's fine, but like, what is Jacob Markstrom really? I mean, the Flames were not that good for a lot of reasons, not just him, you know. And so, how much is he better than Akira Schmid? Yeah, probably. Is he better than who was the other guy they had last year? Vitek Vanacek? Yeah, probably. But yeah, I'm with you. I think that for regular season, I think they'll be really good at. If they get to the playoffs, I still don't trust them. They'd have to do something.
I mean, you got to look at the leadership for that team too, right? I mean, they haven't actually accomplished anything,
right? Yeah,
and when shit hits the fan, when things become difficult, when you're hitting adversity, you look at your leaders, and Nico Hischier and Jack Hughes have not accomplished anything in their careers.
No, yeah, right, exactly.
So
yeah, that's my thing. And well, they did accomplish one thing, which a lot of Islanders fans appreciated, and that was knocking the number one team in the division out of the playoffs a couple of years ago, and that is the most hated New York Rangers. It's hard to bet against the team that won the President's Trophy last year and didn't make a ton of changes. What's funny to me about this Rangers team is that the fact that they didn't make a ton of changes is exactly what's driving Rangers fans crazy, because Rangers fans like to get new toys every couple of weeks or so. And so the fact that this is mainly the same team has driven them completely nuts. They were trying to talk themselves into getting Patrick Kane again for some reason. I don't know why. And now, like, public enemy number one on this team is their captain, Jacob Trouba, who doesn't want to get traded because his wife, who's a doctor, works in New York City. That's why he's here in the first place. And they're like, oh, we'll trade you to the Red Wings. And he's like, no, I don't want. And so now Rangers fans are like apoplectic at their own team captain. So I'm hoping that I'm wrong. I'm hoping that the discord in the Rangers locker room absolutely destroys their season from within. But that being said, on paper, this team is still damn good. And so I would be very surprised if they didn't, you know, finish first again. Maybe not President's Trophy good, but I can't imagine they don't finish first again.
Yeah,
barring any kind of craziness.
Yeah, I think that they'll run it back again. I don't think that they're as good as the the Carolina Hurricanes, which I know you have a differing opinion of the Hurricanes than I do. A bunch of jerks, but Riley Smith joins the team, which was like a meh acquisition. It's kind of like a journeyman right now. So but it's got my big thing is, once again, culturally, and that's going to be a theme, is like with the Boston Bruins, I am obviously well plugged in on like what the culture can do to an organization, but what does it say to the team when you're actively trying to move the guy that you put the C on? And he's like, no, I don't want to go. And they're keeping the C on the guy. Like, but what does that ripple effect look like for everyone else in the locker room? And how does impact everything?
They moved Barclay Goodrow. He had a no trade clause or no move clause, and he was like, fine, I'll put you on waivers. And he ends up in San Jose, which was where they were going to trade him to in the first place. And it was really shady. It was not cool. It was not cool. But, you know, on one hand, you're like, wow, I know Larry Brooks, who's a venerable columnist here, was like, that's the kind of ruthlessness the Rangers need. And then it was like, is it though? Like, it's, you know, there's ruthless, and then there's like kind of being a jerk. And this seemed a little bit like being a jerk. Like, it's Barclay Goodrow. Like, what are we really, you know, this isn't like, you know, making a huge, this isn't like, being ruthless and, you know, trading for, I don't know, Marion.
It's not like a getting out of Ilya Kovalchuk's deal, right? Or anything like that.
Exactly. Right. Yeah, exactly. So again, on paper, this team is still very, very good, but I'm hoping, like you said, the leadership and everything kind of falls apart, and we'll see what happens. But they also have Igor Shesterkin, who they have not signed yet. So that might be a problem too.
I heard rumors that he's looking for like $12 million a year.
I mean, Rangers fans again are ready to throw him overboard because of stuff like that. But then I think they don't realize that this dude is like 60%, maybe 75% of the reason that team was really that good in the first place. So maybe you should rethink that position. But I don't know if I want to give him $12 million a year either. But it's a lot. Also, there's no way Jonathan Quick has a season like he had last year.
No,
the first half
way.
of the season, Quick was spectacular, but I can't imagine that happens again.
That was like a Cinderella season.
It was weird.
Jonathan Quick had. It was wild.
Yeah. So there you go. That's the Metro Division.
Metro Division. There you go, guys. All right. Well, we'll go ahead and start with the Atlantic here. And I'm going to start with the Buffalo Sabres.
Mm-hmm.
Number 8, Buffalo. And I said this in the article that I posted out there. It's like the Titanic meme. It's been 84 years.
Right.
I don't see it. Like, you guys aren't doing anything for me here. Kevin Adams has to be like pulling his hair out at this point.
Yeah.
The GM of the Sabres. They already have Tage Thompson under contract. He didn't have a great year last year compared to the year before.
Right.
The Sabres are putting their money on Tage returning to form. They have Alex Tuck under contract, but they're going to have to start forecasting for that next contract coming up. They're really hoping that new look D with Bowen Byram and Rasmus Dahlin and Owen Power can really take that next step. But I almost feel like it's almost like too many cooks in the kitchen right now with the skill players here and not enough character players that actually know what it takes to win at the NHL level with the Buffalo Sabres. So, at what point does Kevin Adams and the Sabres say enough is enough? And they start to move some of these young players. They already did it with the Casey Middlestat deal that brought in Bowen Byram. They said, all right, well, it's not working out for you, Casey. Let's go ahead and get you a change of scenery. We're going to do the same thing and bring in a young defenseman that has high upside. So I just don't see it. They don't have good goaltending.
Yeah. To me, that's the biggest thing is the goaltending. Like, that's the biggest answer right there,
Yeah. I mean, they had a young goalie come in here, didn't flourish, and now they have to go back to Ukko-Pekka. What does it say to the guy that you said, all right, you're not the guy anymore, we brought in a young, shinier toy, and then the toy, it tarnishes, it's not as shiny anymore, and you go back to the guy. Like, it's going to be difficult. So I don't foresee beautiful things happening for the Buffalo Sabres this year, and the wonderful fans up there in upstate New York. You're going to struggle again.
This team reminds me of a lot of really bad Islanders teams I watched in the 90s, in that they bring in these like veteran guys thinking that, there's, this guy's been around, he's going to be a leader, he's going to, help these young kids come along. That never happens. Like, you end up signing a guy who's 35 years old or 30 years old, and he's going to do what's best for him, and he might be a nice guy, and that's about it. But he's not going to you can't build a team around that. So signing Jason Zucker makes no sense to these guys. I don't know why you do that. Like, you just why I don't understand it. It makes no sense. But they think that he's going to provide something that I'm sure he won't. No offense to Jason Zucker, but he's not going to. Like, I've seen this story a million times. So I'm with you. I don't think they're going to be very good at all.
Excellent. Ottawa Senators are next up for me, number 7. The Sens are one of those like 5 Atlantic teams that are like, all right, it's our turn. The Bruins are finally going to fall out, or some other team is finally going to fall out of the Atlantic playoff picture. And Brady Tkachuk is trying to drag this team in, truculence and all, bringing them into the trenches. I still don't see it. The biggest issue with the Ottawa Senators for me right now is the defensive side of things. Yeah. And Thomas Chabot and the rest of that team it's just not enough for me in order to stem the tide. They had just an absolute miserable time keeping the puck out of their own net last year. Jonas Korpisalo was just abysmal for the Ottawa Senators. That's current Bruin to Jonas Korpisalo. So we'll talk about that later.
Yeah.
But they go out and they address the goaltending position by acquiring former Vezina Trophy winner Linus Ullmark. And they maybe hope that Linus will be able to change the narrative a little bit. Right. Guess what? Linus Ullmark is a Buffalo Sabre before he was a Boston Bruin, and he didn't change the narrative there.
Nope.
And I don't see the blue line in Ottawa being enough to change it. Like, the Bruins play a good system to protect the house and suppress high quality opportunities. That's not something that the Ottawa Senators do. So it's really going to fall on the Ottawa bench and the coaching staff in order to implement a system to mitigate the high danger chances against Linus Ullmark and this blue line. And I'm not sure they have the personnel there to execute that.
Also, any Senator going into this season as a pending UFA, as Linus Ullmark is, should make you very, very nervous if you're an Ottawa Senators fan, because this team does not have a great track record of keeping dudes like that. And if things go south in a hurry, Ullmark won't be a Senator for very long. Also, hiring Travis Green, another guy, the former Islander Travis Green, hasn't done a whole lot in his coaching career. So another curious choice there. So I'm with you. This team, people want this team to be good. I don't think they are.
I mean, honestly, it's a Canadian market, and as an American market fan here, like, I understand they have a bunch of really great fans. It's a difficult Canadian market to talk about, though. Like, it's probably one of like the stepbrother, like little brother types of Canadian markets. They've always felt like they're in the shadow of the Montreal Canadiens and the Toronto Maple Leafs. But for the people that I have talked to that are Sens fans, they're good fans, and it's a good market, and they deserve a good team. I still remember back in the day when the Sens made that run to the final. What an awesome experience they had. Such a good team, and the fans there definitely deserve it, especially now that Eugene Melnyk is out of the picture, and the new owner's coming in. He's willing to spend the money. So it's a matter of time for you Senators, but I do think that you probably are going to have to shed some of these high-end players and acquire more draft capital and hit the reset button here soon. But all right, we're moving on to who I grew up hating the most. Les Canadiens de Montreal. And I do have to, first off, shout out the Habs for having a really good retool. As far as I'm concerned, I think that they've done a really good job of resetting that team. And they brought in, say what you want about Uri Slafkovsky. He was, in my opinion, the right pick at that time. And, players take different timelines in order to develop and stuff. But they signed him to a long-term 8-year deal. If he pans out, that cap hit that they signed him to is going to look like a genius move by that Habs front office. And for the most part, it was a pretty quiet offseason for the Habs. They didn't do a whole lot other than the last week and a half or so. When they went out and they highlighted their roster and they brought in a guy with 40 goals. How many goals did Patrick Laine have that one year?
I think it was
Winnipeg. Was it 50 or 60 or something?
Let me see. He had, that's a good question. He had Winnipeg. He had 44.
40. Okay. Yeah. I don't know why it was so high, but I was like, this kid is like a lethal sniper.
They were really good. Yeah.
Every time he shot the puck, I felt like even if it was a wrist shot, it just flew off his stick. And you didn't see any young players shooting the puck quite like Patrick Laine did. But I mean, what better way to signal to your team that we're transitioning out of this, let's acquire youth, let's acquire draft picks, than going out and acquiring a player like Patrick Laine, who's looking for a change of scenery and has a 40-goal pedigree. So really like what Montreal's doing, as much as that pains me as a Bruins guy. Honestly, fuck Montreal. I hope they continue to fail and they look terribly, but it's not going to be a great year for Montreal again, but they're going to take big steps forward as far as I'm concerned.
The fact that their goaltending is still Sam Montembeault and Caden Primo again is surprising. Like, go out and get a goalie. This is Montreal, man. Yeah, go out and get a goalie. Like, what are we talking about? Come on, So until that happens, and their defense, I don't particularly like either. In fact, if anything, I would put them probably below Ottawa in that department, because but I think their forwards are pretty good. And again, Laine, hey, why not? Give it a shot, see what happens. If it doesn't work, it doesn't work. But
I do see like Slafkovsky taking a big step forward. I see Cole Caulfield taking a big step forward.
Suzuki's very good.
Suzuki's also a really good two-way centerman. He compares himself to former Bruin Patrice Bergeron. He wants to model his game after him, which probably earns him a little bit of praise with the local Quebecois. But All right, so we're moving on. Next up, I have the Detroit Red Wings. The Yzer plan is not going to plan, ladies and gentlemen.
Nope.
But I do think that with some of the veterans that the Red Wings have acquired, that they're still over those Ottawas and the Montreals of the world and the Buffaloes of the world. They're probably that upper echelon of that bubble range of teams. They were on the precipice this previous year, but when things got serious, when they had to go into a battle and beat the Washington Cap, it's like nobody wanted that final playoff spot.
Yeah, it was hilarious.
All of those teams were just floundering, and none of them were taking that big step forward. So, but they were able to convince Patrick Kane to resign somehow. I don't know how, but I just don't understand really what Patrick or what Steve Yzerman is doing over there. They're going out and acquiring veteran forwards like Andrew Kopp, and it's just not quite yet. It seems like he's trying to supplement the young players with players that actually know what they're supposed to do as a National Hockey League player. But then they get to Detroit, and it's like they're buried on the third and fourth line, and they can't actually lead or whatever. I don't think Lucas Raymond is the guy you want to lean on. I don't know if Dylan Larkin is truly a captain material player, or if they just named Dylan Larkin captain out of necessity because he was due to a contract and wanted that. And I'm not, that's all speculation, but like Dylan Larkin's not the guy that I would look to when shit hits the fan and adversities hits. He's not going to drag you into the trenches. So
I'm looking at the roster now on Puckpedia, and it's almost like a fantasy team roster. Like it's a bunch of guys that are like older guys, and like you said, maybe they could be okay and hang around that last playoff spot. But as a team, I don't really know what to make of this or where they're going to go. And it's funny because all four of these teams, they all kind of fall into the same category for me, which is sort of like hockey, Twitter, internet crush. Like, that like, oh, this is the year they're going to be good. Like, I really like these guys. And then
his underlying metrics are amazing.
Exactly. But then when it's time to dance, these guys are all staying home, and nobody's there. And it's like, well, I guess this wasn't the year. So they're all falling into that category for me. And again, like we talked about with the Metro, like, would it surprise me if one of them made the playoffs? No, not really, because somebody will fall off. It always happens. But I'm not looking at this team thinking like that's a playoff team. Like I just can't really see.
Yeah, agreed. So I know that was the lame answer because I have no new teams making the postseason out of the Atlantic.
That's all right.
And all of these teams are like, we're ready. Like somebody's going to fall out. And I just don't have it yet. It's not there yet for me. Yeah. So you guys are going to have to wait another year for the Boston Bruins to fall out, even though everyone wants to pick the Bruins. All right. So for the Atlantic Division, I have 4 teams obviously making the playoffs, depending on how the wild card situation works out. But I do have next up the Tampa Bay Lightning. And Tampa Bay has a winning legacy. They have obviously 2 cups that if you listen to Two Bad Sack, I call them asterisk cups. When I'm in the COVID season, when I'm in the bubble, I have my thoughts about Tampa Bay, but they during those seasons they were a buzzsaw of a team, incredibly good up front, incredibly good on the blue line, incredibly good in net. And last year you saw after the surgery, Andrei Vasilevsky take a little bit of a step back. They weren't able to. I mean, honestly, they did actually stay afloat a little bit before Andrei Vasilevsky was able to return. Their goaltending situation was okay enough, surprisingly, with them, playing the way that they were. So, but there was a lot of transition this this current off season. You have the team deciding to prioritize Jake Gensel over Steven Stamkos.
Yeah, it's weird. Yeah.
Like I still don't understand. Like I understand Jake Gensel is younger and everything, but this is the guy that was your captain for 2 Stanley Cups, and it's not like he completely fell off the radar. Like I understand if he only scored like 15 goals this year, he scored 40 goals last year. Like he's still contributing at a high level. There's not many 40 goal scorers in this league, and Brisebois, the GM of the Lightning, decides, you know what, we're going to let you go, Steven. And Stamkos was very vocal about it. He's like, I barely heard anything from the Lightning.
Yeah. The way it went down was very strange. Very strange.
Very odd. Yeah. So he ends up going over and signing with the Nashville Predators. The Lightning end up bringing in Ryan McDonough back, who already won a cup with the Lightning. So I like that move, but that also coincides with the departure of top pair, as far as I'm concerned, top pair defenseman Mikhail Sergachev, who is sent off to Utah in a really odd deal to me. And I mean, obviously it was a cap clearing move in order for them to sign Jake Gensel, but I don't see the logic in a lot of these transactions that the Tampa Bay Lightning did this year.
Yeah, no, I agree with everything you said. That said, they're still really good. And, until further notice, again, I can't see them falling out anywhere. But, this team just produces dudes that produce, and so like, I know in games against the Islanders, somehow, if it's not Braden Point, it's Mikey Esimont all of a sudden has like,
I know
his life. It's like, where'd this guy come from? But yeah, no, you're right. Like a lot of curious decisions, but they're keeping the guys they're keeping, and I guess it's Victor Hedman's team now, and Kucherov and Point and those guys are still there. But yeah, I'd rather have Stamkos than Gensel, but he's the younger guy, so I guess they went with that.
Yep, absolutely. Next up, I have everyone's favorite team, the Toronto Maple Leafs. Death, taxes, and the Leafs losing in the postseason.
Yes.
These are the constants in life, especially if they ever face the Boston Bruins. That makes me happy. Yeah, as soon as the Bruins eliminated the Leafs in this previous offseason, I was like, this year is a success because the Bruins can still say that they are Toronto's daddy, and that is a win for me, especially with the center ice. We'll talk about the Bruins in a little bit. We're here to talk about the Toronto Maple Leafs. The Leafs moved on from Tyler Bertuzzi, former Bruins legend, and they also lost Noah Gregor, which is interesting. But for the most part, they didn't make a lot of changes other than moving that letter C off of the chest of John Tavares over to Austin Matthews, which, say what you want, Austin Matthews is a really high-end offensive player in the National Hockey League, probably one of the best scorers. But once again, I mentioned this about Dylan Larkin. Not a guy that I imagine dragging the team into the fight.
No.
So I don't see a lot going on here. The Leafs didn't have a lot of cap space to work with. They did bring in Chris Tanev. They brought in Oliver Ekman-Larsson. I did like Oliver Ekman-Larsson's season in Florida. I thought he actually had a really good rebound season after a lot of the Vancouver Canucks fans were lambasting the guy. He played against the Bruins in the postseason. I saw a lot of him. He moved the puck really, really well, and he didn't fold it up when he faced a little bit of adversity or physicality. I thought he did a good job. So we'll see. Another big thing to note is that it seems like the Leafs have officially anointed Joseph Wall as the starting goalie. So we'll see. I think he's a better goalie option than what Samsonov was for the Leafs. So what's your thoughts on the Leafs there, Dan?
So many. If you hate the Leafs, trust me, we hate them twice as much, if not more, if you could believe it. We did a whole episode celebrating Tavares losing the captaincy. We called it 32 thoughts about John Tavares losing the Maple Leafs captaincy and all that stuff. And like I was telling you before, we do a bit called Master Leaf Theater where we do dramatic readings of articles about the Leafs with like dramatic music underneath it. We had a friend who's an actor come in and do some like William Shatner-esque readings of some of these things, and it was a great time. This team talked all summer. I mean, if you had a dime for every time you heard somebody on Sportsnet radio say, well, they can't come back with the same core, you probably could have bought the Leafs like this. But guess what? The core is still here. So like you said, they couldn't do anything because they didn't have the cap room, or, if they wanted to trade Mitch Marner, he's still here. They wanted to trade Tavares, he's still here. If they wanted to trade Nylander, he's still here. They, like you said, they got rid of Bertuzzi. But to me, maybe Joseph Wall is a better goalie than Samsonov because he could stay. But is he going to be healthy? Can he play 40 games, 50 games, whatever it takes to be a starting goalie? They got Anthony Stolarz, who was with the Panthers last year now. To me, this team still looks like a first round playoff loss. And I think we're all hoping that it is again. If not, maybe make the playoffs at all. But they'll be good. But I just can't it's going to take a little bit more than this to, I think, get out of the first round, assuming that they play the Bruins, the Panthers, even the Lightning again. So let's hope the streak continues.
Yeah, I mean, you're not going to win a game when you give up 5 or 6 goals. So they've got to figure out the blue line side of things if they're going to really take a big step forward and be a true contender. I can honestly say I'm not a complete homer. So I have chosen the Boston Bruins to be number 2 in the Atlantic Division. And the Boston Bruins are a team that a lot of people are like, when the hell is this team going to fall off? They're led by Brad Marchand, for God's sakes, who's 36 years old.
Is he really? Gosh.
Yeah, he's getting up there. He's getting up there.
Been around. Yeah.
But they go out and they address their areas of need. The Boston Bruins, with the departure of David Krejci and Patrice Bergeron, they were in dire straits in the center ice position, and they have Pavel Zacha swap over after his deal from the New Jersey Devils, which was a swindling, by the way. And they have Charlie Coyle jump up the roster. It wasn't amazing, but it was serviceable, and the team was good enough on the defensive side and the goaltending side of things to mitigate the difference. And they had a good season last year. So what do the Bruins do? They go out and they finally have those bonus cap hits come off the books from Krejci, comes off the books from Bergeron. They have some of these players that are just not a great fit for them anymore. Move on. And they go out and address an area of need. And they pay more than probably what you would like to have paid, but they get a true number 1 center in Elias Lindholm, who I think will succeed really well in the Boston Bruins system. And he's going to be PP1. He's going to be probably like PK2. He's going to be 5-on-5 line 1 alongside, whether it's Pavel Zacha or Brad Marchand on the left wing, but he's going to be with David Pastrnak. So he hasn't played with line mates like this since he was in Calgary when he was with
Gaudreau, probably.
Yeah, Johnny Gaudreau and Matthew Tkachuk when he had 40 goals on the season. So I do expect a big bounce back from Elias Lindholm. And Elias Lindholm is also a guy that's won faceoffs at like a 56% rate, which the Boston Bruins are really in desperate need of. And that's going to fill a gap for them pretty dramatically. In addition to Lindholm, they brought in Nikita Zadorov. A good physical second pair in a pinch can play first pair defenseman. That makes this Boston Bruins team even more intimidating. Charlie McAvoy was kind of looking at himself in the mirror last offseason or last playoff saying, I'm the only guy that's going to destroy somebody going through the middle of the ice. And he's much better served playing like two-way defense because he's a truly dynamic and top tier defensive player. And having a guy like Zadorov on the roster at a difficult cap hit, but maybe it'll look better in a couple of seasons. I don't know. That'll put a little bit less pressure on a guy like Charlie McAvoy to be a dynamic, Norris caliber defenseman potentially if voters can get the Cale Makars out of their fantasies. By the way, I'm a big fan of like implementing another defenseman award. Like create like a Bobby Orr trophy, not just because I'm a Bobby Orr guy, but a Bobby Orr trophy for the top offensive defenseman.
Yeah, and I've heard this a long time. Usually they want to do a defensive award, like that kind of thing. But that'd be fine.
Leave the Norris for like two-way defense, like all around game. But like give the Cale Makars. And I'm not saying Cale Makar's bad at the defensive side of the game. Let's not say that, but. The Quinn Hugheses, the Adam Foxes, the Cale Makars, the maybe even who's the kid going to Montreal right now? God, I can't remember the kid's name. Anyways, he's coming from BU, going over to Montreal. He's going to be a stud.
Oh, right. Yeah. No, I know. Lane Hudson.
Exactly. Yep. That's who I'm talking about. Like, give these kids a trophy because they deserve it too, and they're changing the game the way that they're playing. But the Boston Bruins, I think, with these two acquisitions, are going to be really good. They obviously lost Linus Ullmark, which is an interesting dynamic because they had the goalie hug, they had the greatest tandem in the league. Maybe some other teams can argue with that, but it was a really good tandem of Linus Ullmark and Jeremy Swayman. They've anointed Swayman as the guy. They bring in Jonas Korpisalo as a reclamation project. But I do think that these additions that the Boston Bruins had addressed their biggest areas of need. And that team was like 20 minutes away from forcing the eventual Stanley Cup champion Florida Panthers from a pivotal Game 7. So I've got the Boston Bruins at number 2, and I'm interested in hearing your thoughts on the Bees.
Yeah, no, I agree. I mean, you're the expert. You know more than I do. But to me, again, like I said before, I love a team that plays a system. And Jim Montgomery came in and he ended up implementing the system, and it works. And it works for these guys. He gets the buy-in, you know, and they can just churn you into in a game and just, like, you know, chew you up throughout the entire game. Unlike the Leafs, I think they have what it takes to win in the playoffs, which is pretty good too. They do have to pay Swayman, so you can't just anoint him. You got to pay the man as well. He wants his money, and so that I assume will work that out at some point. But this to me is a really good team. I don't get why this happens. This has happened like the last couple of years in a row where people are like, "Wow, this obviously the Bruins are about due to fall off," and I'm always like, "Why?" I don't know why. Why would you say what purpose? What, just because you think it's their time? I don't think so. The same you can say for Tampa too. Like, well, they've got to fall off one of these days. Well, why? Well, I don't understand. Like, just it's not just because you want it to. Like, they have to. These are like the Penguins are a team that's falling apart. Like, they have, you know, three really good players that are old, and then everybody else is sort of like, what is he doing here? This is not one of those teams. Like, this team is still really good, and you know, I mean, the depth. You know, I'm not 100% sure about these guys, but I think they'll be fine. And again, as long as everybody pulls on the rope at the same time, like the coach wants them to, they'll be really, really good. I fully expect this team to go deep in the playoffs, if not, you know, really, really, really deep. So,
yeah, I mean, it all comes down to asset management, right?
Yes.
I mean, the Boston Bruins, they had a core of like Zdeno Chara, Patrice Bergeron, David Krejci, Tuukka Rask. Those guys are all gone, right? But what did the front office do? They went out and despite the memes about the 2015 draft, about, oh wow, none of those guys. Oh yeah, you could have had Kyle Connor, Matt Barzal, blah blah blah.
Right.
Like, it wasn't a great draft for the Bruins, but they still ended up going out there and getting a guy like Charlie McAvoy. They got David Pastrnak. They got Jeremy Swayman. Like, these guys are legitimate star players.
Sure.
They weren't in the first 10 picks of the draft. So give the Bruins, like, you know, amateur scouts their roses. They did a great job going out and getting these guys. And Bruins fans that are listening, I'm tired of you guys bitching about the 2015 draft and the Bruins drafting ability. At least they're not those other teams that we were alluding to earlier.
I always laugh because, like, Matt Barzal is obviously one of those, and people bring it up, and I'm always like, I don't know, man, the Bruins did pretty well. Like, it's not like they just fell apart not having Matt Barzal. Like, you know, I don't even know if Barzal would have even worked out with the Bruins. He's just he's not a real Boston Bruins type player. You know what I'm saying? Like, I love him. He's great. He's going to be on the island for a long time, but I don't think it would have worked out for him in Boston. But it is fun. Like, it's not like this team just, you know, became the Arizona Coyotes overnight because they didn't draft Matt Barzal and Kyle Connor. Like, they still ended up pretty good. So I don't really get those jokes either.
It's just an easy thing. I don't know if you know this, but Boston sports radio is
I can imagine
abysmal. I mean, I guess when you win that much across the board, it becomes
definitely blame Tom Brady. As
thanks, Tom. Dickhole. Anyways, number 1 in the Atlantic Division. How can you not go against the Stanley Cup champions? I actually flew down to Florida, not this playoffs, but the year before, when the Boston Bruins were that buzzsaw of a team. And the Bruins, after game 3 and 4, which me and my daughter were in house for, we had a 3-1 series lead, flying home. And I'm like, it's done.
You got it.
It's easy peasy. And then the wheels fucking fell off. And the Panthers are just a difficult beast. And it's just like I kind of compare their forecheck to like a tsunami. Like, the waves just keep coming, and you can withstand the first 3 or 4, but eventually the next wave coming in, it's gonna wear you down. And I was hoping that Sam Reinhart wouldn't be able to come to terms with the Florida Panthers, and he would go and check out greener pastures and do like what Tampa Bay Lightning forward, what the hell is his name? He just went and signed to the Ducks like 2 years ago. Killorn, Tampa couldn't pay him, so he goes and signs with the Ducks. And I was like, oh, Sam Reinhart's going to go sign with a no-name team and get his money. Like, he won a cup right off in the sunset and go get your money. No, of course they get to keep the guy. And the Panthers are a difficult team to assess. I mean, they have Ekman Larson leaving. They have a couple other players on the depth that are leaving, but for the most part, they maintain their roster. The big players are staying. Bobrovsky's still there,
right?
Who I think has done a lot of good work and reclaiming his reputation around the league as a legitimate, worthy of that contract that he's signed, goaltender.
Definitely.
So I have no reason not to give Florida the number one, and you're number one until somebody beats you, right? So
yeah, totally. Yeah, no, I can't see this team doing anything. I mean, again, I wonder if they reach sort of again the lightning stage where they know they're good. They just need to get to the playoffs and do it, and they can do it again. And so I don't know if they'll win like the President's Trophy, but it's hard to pick against them. They're still really good. And yeah, playing against these guys is not fun. And but I mean, this from watching the Bruins. I saw a little bit of this, during the Islanders a couple of years ago when they were really, really good, defensively, and they would just chew you up. And, it's a fun when your team plays like that in that sort of buzzsaw wave after wave after wave style. It's like a joy to watch. It's brutal. And you can see the other team getting worn down, and it's just a great, great feeling. And so the Panthers are that team now. And again, like you said, until further notice, I can't imagine that's going to change. And they're still really good. And now, Sergei Bobrovsky for a little while wasn't himself, and now that he has become, once again, kind of I think found himself. Now we're even in more trouble now. So we'll see. But damn good team.
Awesome. All right. Well, there you have it. You have our Metropolitan and our Atlantic Division top eights. Who do you have as number one overall?
That's a tough one. I don't know. It's kind of early to tell. I don't even know. I mean, Dallas was really, really good last year. I mean, they finished with 130. They only missed the President's Trophy by 1 point. I think they could probably do it again. I've always liked Dallas. I don't know why. There's something about them that I think is really, really good. Nobody really in the West, although the Pacific, I should say. Although Edmonton, I don't know what's going on out there anymore if they can put it together. So I don't know. It feels first overall is a tough one because it's like so many variables and so much going on that it's kind of hard to say right now. As long as it isn't the Rangers, I'll be happy. But that was not a fun experience. But this is the way the NHL wants it. They like having the parity. They like having a lot of teams that are kind of in it. I would have an easier time picking who's going to be dead last than I would having pick who's first. Because there's a lot more pretty good teams. Like teams that if things break right, they could have a heck of a season. And they're than the ones that are like, this team ain't going anywhere. So. We'll have to see, but it's gonna be an interesting one. And there's so many. There wasn't a ton of movement, but what did happen seems significant. So, like I said, like we talked about the Devils, we talked about the Bruins getting Lindholm and those guys. So, it's not a lot of moves, but moves that should really solidify a lot of teams out there. And it's gonna make for a wide open league.
Yeah. Well, what about for the East? Do you have the Rangers or the Panthers as number one?
Oh, I thought you meant over the course of the entire league.
Yeah.
I think it's got to be the Panthers probably first overall. Again, I could honestly see the Bruins doing it. I'm not just telling you that because you're you. I think I could see them doing that. Like, again, if Jeremy Swayman is as good as he's been over the last couple of years and Lindholm and fits in with Pasternak as you would think, why not? I mean, again, the regular season and the playoffs are two different things, right? So like if a team just gets on a roll, then there's no reason why the Bruins couldn't just blitz through the regular season, but the Panthers too. I mean, but again, to me, I feel like the Panthers are going to do what Tampa did, which is like, we don't need to finish first overall. We just need to get to the playoffs, get a good matchup and get in there. So
absolutely.
So we'll see. I mean, I could say that. I don't know how, again, it's hard to have a definitive. It won't be the Islanders. And like I said, I hope it's not the Rangers. So there you go.
Fair enough. All right. Well, Dan, it was great having you here. We're going to go ahead and wrap up here. Appreciate those of you that tuned in to the live stream. And I hope you guys are able to take some of the things that we're sharing with you and maybe learn a little bit more and maybe apply those to your fantasy drafts that are coming up and take some lessons there. Anyways, Dan, I will catch you later, buddy. For those that were listening, those that are listening, how can they find your podcast?
Islanders Anxiety everywhere. We also do a spinoff called Weird Islanders, the podcast, where we have a guest on to talk about a guy who played for the Islanders for a little bit of time. We have a Patreon, patreon.com/Islanders Anxiety. And we've been doing stuff all summer there. And we're going to start again in October. And basically, you just look us up. You can find us on Twitter at Isles Anxiety Pod. And you can find me at Culture of Losing, is my Twitter handle. And then my friend Michael Leboff, who I do the podcast with, he goes by the Big Lebowski with 2 E's. So Isles Anxiety Pod is the easiest place. But yeah, check us out. We got a ton of stuff. And if you hate the Leafs, trust me, you're in the right place. We do.
Excellent. Excellent. All right, dude. Well, thanks again. We're going to go ahead and wrap up here, and we appreciate everyone tuning in, and we'll go ahead and catch you next time.
All right. Take care.